Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ayush and today I'm going to share 8 things every beginner should know before using Copic markers. So before getting into the video, I just want to share a few of my recent drawings where I have used Copic markers to color, and the main reason why I prefer Copic markers to color my drawings is because they are very flexible. By flexible I mean you can change in different layers and different shades of any color you want quite easily and quite smoothly, so you can get the exact shade you want to color. They give really good results which are rich in color. The colors are very vibrant and the result can be very smooth if you just know how to use them perfectly. And once you know how to use these color markers, you can create some really great drawings which look almost like a print. And trust me, they are a lot of fun to work with as they are alcohol based markers. They blend with each other very easily, very smoothly, provided that you are using the suitable paper. So these were few of my drawings where I used Copic markers to color them. It's been 6 to 7 months since I started using Copic markers for coloring my drawings, and these were few of my drawings which I colored recently. Now let's get started with the video. So the first and most important thing that you should know before using Copic markers is the right paper which is suitable for Copic markers. So when I started using Copic markers, I did not know anything about Copic markers, how to use them, and especially what kind of paper is suitable for Copic markers. And that is why I ended up buying a bleed proof paper from Taylor Rowney company for alcohol markers. So that paper was bleed proof and the ink did not come on the other side of the page, but the paper was really thin and it was almost transparent. I could not do any blending with my colors on the paper, and now I'm using one of the best paper available for using Copic markers or any alcohol markers. And the papers which I use are actually two different types of paper, but they work almost the same and they both are really good. So the first paper which I use is Bristol Smooth from Strathmore. This paper is of A3 size, and the second paper which I use is Blending Cards from Express It, and this blending card is of A4 size. Both the papers work almost the same. They are able to absorb the ink of my markers. I can do some really good blending quite easily without doing much of a hassle. Both of the paper are really thick. They are almost like a cardstock. Now the reason why I'm using two different papers for my drawings is because of their sizes. When I want to draw an A4 size drawing, at that time I use my blending card to draw and color, and when I want to draw a larger drawing than A4 size, I move on to my A3 size Bristol Smooth paper. So if you're a beginner and you are looking for a suitable paper for Copic markers or any alcohol markers, I would recommend these two paper, Bristol Smooth from Strathmore and Blending Cards from Express It. Now the second thing which you need to know is how to avoid strips or lines, whatever you want to call. So these are basically when I started coloring with alcohol markers, I faced this as my first issue with alcohol markers. So basically when you try to color any drawing, you end up getting a pattern, a line of strips of the color you color with. To make it more clear, I'll show you an example. So I'm using a dark gray shade which is a neutral gray and it is N8. I'll give some strokes with these markers from the brush tip. So let's give some random strokes. Suppose I'm coloring a drawing and I start coloring like this because I am trying to fill up my coloring area where I need to color with this color. So as you can see, there are different strips or lines, whatever you want to call it. Basically a pattern you can see clearly of the brush strokes which I just gave. So basically it's not smooth at all and it does not look good. As a result, your drawing and your coloring won't be neat and it won't be smooth. So initially when I started coloring, I started out like this and I did not know how to handle this and how to improvise this thing. And you can even check my previous videos where the initial videos where I started using my alcohol markers for the first time, and I did this same mistake there. But after using alcohol markers for a while, I came to know how to get over this ridiculous pattern. So basically this is the first layer of ink which I just put with my gray marker. Now to get a smooth and neat layer of ink with the Copic marker, you just need to apply few more layers. If you apply approximately 2 to 3 layers, then you will get a much more refined, smooth and neat layer of ink. So I'll show you by adding more layers on my first layer. So this layer will be the second layer. So let's just repeat the same thing. I am applying the second layer of ink, and without thinking much, you just I'm just trying to fill up the coloring area where I need to color, and that's it. The second layer is done and you can clearly see there is a big difference now. It is much more smooth and much more neat than the first layer. It does become a little more darker because I added another layer of ink, but you get a smooth and neat layer of your ink, which is really good, and it looks really neat and good after finishing your drawing. If you want, you can add more layers till you are satisfied with the smoothness and with the shade of the color you are coloring with. Let's try to add one more layer and see how it turns out. So I'm adding the third layer now on top of it. I'm just repeating the same thing again, just filling up the coloring area without thinking much, just moving my hand. So that's it, that's done. That was the third layer, and now you can see the ink is a little bit more smoother and neat than the second layer, and also a little bit more darker because I added more ink to it. So if you're using any alcohol marker or Copic markers for coloring, to avoid this strips or these lines which you get, you always add around 2 to 3 layers of ink at least, and then you will get much more smoother and neat layer of ink. Now this point takes me to my third point, which is layers. So as we all know, there are a lot of colors and a lot of shades in alcohol markers or in Copic markers. One of the best part about alcohol markers is that even if you use a single marker, a single color, you can get more than one shades out of the same marker, and that can be done by adding more and more layers by using the same marker. To make it clear, I'll give you an example. So this time I'm using a dark pink color, which is RV09. So I'll just use the brush tip again, and I'll give few strokes using the brush tip, and this is basically the first layer. So the first layer is always the lightest shade of the same color which you are using. Now if you add more layers with the same marker, the color will get more and more darker, and you can actually use it in your advantage. You can exactly choose which kind of shade you want in a particular color by just adding more layers, or by just simply giving the first or second layer. So let's add the second layer of ink, and let's see how it turns out. But this time I'll add ink only on half of the colored part. So here we go. So I'm adding from the left side, again the same strokes, and it's done. So as you can clearly see, on the left side we have a darker shade of the same color, and on the right side we have the lightest shade of the same color. And now let's add one more layer, the third layer, and we will see what happens now. So I'll add again from the left side by simply giving the same strokes, and you can see clearly the left side has become more darker, and as we move towards the right side, the color gets more and more lighter because the first layer was the lightest and the second layer became a bit darker and the last third layer was the darkest. And this is why Copic markers are so flexible, because you can choose the exact shade you want to work with of the same color by just adding more and more layers till you get your desired result. So basically it's like one single marker has more than 3 shades of the same color, which is so awesome because now you will have more shades and more options to color with. Now moving on to our fourth point, which is one of the most important aspect of any alcohol markers, which is blending. So alcohol markers are so popular because they blend with each other very easily because of the alcohol based ink, and you can create some really great drawings by blending these wide variety of markers. So I'll give you an example on blending. I'm using 3 different color shades of blue color. So for blending, the first thing you always need to keep in mind is always start with the lightest shade. So here I'm using the lightest shade of the blue color. I'll just add one layer of the lightest blue shade, just like this, by giving some strokes, and there we have the lightest shade of blue color. Now we'll add the darker shade, which is the mid tone among these 3 shades, which is B04, and this will be basically the second layer. Just like we did here, this was the second layer. So here we will do the second layer just like we did earlier. I'm moving from left to right, and there we have the second layer of the same color shade. And now finally I'll add the darkest shade, which is B06, again from the left side, just like we did earlier. And there we have 3 different shades of the same blue color. I have not blended them yet, but the first step is done, and the first step is to assemble the colors you need to blend. So before starting to blend, you need to make sure that the colors you want to blend are already on the paper, and you start with the lightest shade and you move on to the darkest shade. It's always safer to start with the lightest shade, because even if you do any mistakes, there is no need to worry, because that is the lightest shade. You can improve it by adding the darker shades of the same color. But if you start with the darker shade and you do any mistake, then there is no going back, because that was the darkest shade. You cannot go back dark to the lighter shade, right? So that is why I always prefer to start with the lighter shade and slowly move on to the darker and darker tone. Now we have assembled the color on the paper. Now we need to start blending. So while assembling, I moved on from the lighter to darker shade, but while blending, I always move on to darker to lighter shade. So here for blending the darker and the mid darker tone, I am using the lighter shade in both of the colors, which is the mid tone. So for blending, I'll use this mid tone color to blend these 2 colors. And for blending the lighter tone with the mid tone, I'll use the lighter shade again to blend both of the shades. So basically, when you are blending 2 different tones, always use the lighter tone to blend both the tones. So for blending the darker tone and the mid tone, I'm using the lighter one, which is the mid tone. So I'll just add few more layers of mid tone, just like this, and move on to the lightest shade which we used, which was B01, and we will blend these 2 color, which is mid tone and the lighter tone. Just keep on adding layers till you are satisfied with the blend. I'll add few more layers to make it more smooth. So again, repeat the same process. Go from darker to the lighter shade when you're blending. So I'm moving from left to right, darker to the lightest. And we are Done! That is a perfect blend of blue color with the three different shades. You can clearly see the left side is the darker shade of blue color, and as we move on to the right side, it slowly gets lighter and lighter. It looks really smooth, neat, and exactly how we want it in our drawings. And that is how I always blend. I always keep these points in my mind when I'm coloring and trying to blend. Alright, let's move on to our fifth point, which is motion. So motion is basically the movement of your hand while you are coloring, and the motion of your hand can affect the end result of your drawing. So I basically prefer two types of motion while coloring, which are, first is the circular motion. So basically in this step, what you do is you just move your hand, the brush nib, in a circular motion to color, and you slowly move forward. So here you are just going round and round circular motion, and trying and filling up the coloring area, coloring space where you want to color. That is the first layer I just put on the paper. As you can see, it's already pretty smooth, but we can make it more smooth and refine it more by adding the second layer and the third layer if needed. But before making it more smooth, I'll show you the second motion which I prefer to color, which is just strokes, single strokes or sometimes even double strokes. So it goes something like this, just strokes of color of with your brush tip. This is single stroke, and this is double stroke. So you can clearly make out the difference between circular motion and the stroke motion. In the circular motion, it is more darker and much more refined and smooth, because in that motion we allow a lot of ink to get into the paper, as compared to the strokes where we move our hand very quickly, which results in getting less amount of the ink on the paper. So I prefer the circular motion when I want to color a small area, and the stroke motion when I want to color a larger area. So this was the first layer which I added. Let's try to put more layers on both the motions which I did. First we'll do the circular motion. Again we'll repeat the same process, but we are adding more ink now, which will make it more refined and more smooth. And it's done. We repeat the same thing on the left side with the stroke motion. First this single motion, and then this double motion. So I don't prefer using the circular motion when I have to color a larger area, because it takes a lot of time and it is much slower than the strokes. Strokes are much faster, and you can cover a larger area on the paper quite quickly. But the difference is, in strokes you'll have to add more layers of ink as compared to the circular motion, because here in strokes you are applying less amount of ink as compared to the circular motion. So these are the two types of motion and reasons why I use them and why I prefer them to color. Now moving on to our sixth point, which is inking. Now inking is again a very important part of drawing, because it gives the skeleton to your character and the base line work of your drawing. So you need to make sure that the ink you are using works well with your Copic markers and it does not spoil your drawing. So for inking you can use either a black marker or a G pen. I'll tell you the differences between them, but let's start with the marker first. So again, you get a lot of varieties in these black markers, but the one which I used a lot was Copic multiliner, because it was meant to work with Copic markers. So first what I'm going to do is I'll add some lines using my Copic multiliner on the paper. Just some random lines. Just like this. And now let's add a layer of ink for which I'm using a yellow marker. So I just add few strokes of ink above the ink the black ink which we used. So as you can see, it did not smudge and it did not spoil the ink which we did earlier. So that was the Copic multi-liner ink which I just showed, and it works really good with Copic markers, and you can use them in your drawings without any fear of smudging them. And now let's move on to the second type of ink which you can use for your drawings, which I prefer and which I've been using lately, and it works really good with my drawings. So it is from the Deleter company, the G pen, and the ink too from the Deleter company. And the ink is actually the type 4 ink of the Deleter black manga ink. So let's try to add a few lines with this, and let's put the ink on the paper and see the difference. So I'll do the same thing. I'll just add few lines using the G pen. So here I'm drawing some thick lines, and I'll also draw a few thin lines by just changing the pressure on the nib of this pen. Well, that's the specialty of this pen. You can change the thickness and thinness of your lines just by changing the pressure on your pen. And our lines are ready. We'll give some time to let the ink dry, and you can clearly see the difference now between the Copic multi-liner inking lines and the Deleter manga ink. The Deleter ink is much more darker and much more black than Copic multi-liner's ink. The Copic multi-liner ink sort of fades away, especially when you are erasing the pencil lines you drew earlier, which is not the case with the Deleter manga ink. It does not fade away when you erase or when you apply alcohol ink on it, and that is one of the big differences between these two inking pens. Now let's see how it turns out when we try to apply Copic markers ink above the manga ink. So I'll just do the same process. I'll just go and give some strokes just like we did with the Copic multi-liners ink. So I've applied approx 3 layers, and you can see that it did not fade away at all. It is still much blacker and much dark than the Copic multi-liners ink. It does not fade away and remains as dark as it was earlier, and that's why when you finish coloring, the outlines of your character will be more visible as compared to the Copic multi-liners line. Because Copic multi-liners ink sort of fades away and it is not as dark as the manga ink, the character, the drawing, it will not pop out so much, especially the inking lines which are the skeleton of your character. So at the end there is a huge difference between these two inks. The drawings which are done with the manga ink will pop out more and will look much better and give you much better results. And this is why I prefer the Deleter manga ink for inking my drawings, and also because it is pressure sensitive, and you can change the thickness and thinness of lines just by changing the pressure on the pen. It will take a while to get used to the G pen, but once you do, your drawings will improve a lot, and the end result will be much better than what it was previously. So that was all about inking. Now moving on to our 7th point, which is try to keep a paper below your palm while you are coloring. So if you have watched my drawing videos, sometimes while coloring I keep a paper below my palm. You must be thinking why. If you are wondering, then it is because sometimes my hands get a little sweaty, and if I don't use a paper below my palm while coloring, it might end up spoiling my drawing. So that is why sometimes when my hands get a lot sweaty, I use a paper below my palm to ensure that the drawing is neat and tidy and not spoiled. And now moving on to the last point of the video, which is never be scared or afraid. So sometimes what happens is when we try to color our drawing with some new colors which we have not used a lot and we are not comfortable with, we are not sure how they will work and how they will react to the other colors which we want to use. So in this scenario, the best thing to do is try those colors in a different paper roughly. So for example, here is a page which I separately use only for rough testing of my colors, where I'm not sure how they will work and how to go with the blending. So whenever I'm unsure and a bit afraid to use it directly on my drawing when I have not used those colors a lot, so I always test them out first in a different paper and then I get a sort of idea how they will work, and then only I move on to my drawing. So it's always best to test out your colors when you are not sure how they will look on your drawing. This helps me a lot to get more confident on the colors which I have never used before. And that was it. So these are the 8 things you need to know before getting started with Copic markers or any alcohol marker. I was getting a lot of questions regarding coloring, and that is why I decided to do this video where I have shared almost everything which is important to know about using alcohol markers. So I hope this video is helpful and you enjoyed the video. If you did, then do drop a like and share your views down below in comment section, and also share if you want to see more videos like this in future. And if you're not subscribed yet, then subscribe for more awesome videos, tutorials, Q&As and more. You can even follow me at Twitter, Instagram and Facebook at Ayush Pencil Art to get my daily updates, and I'll be also sharing their links down below, so go check them out. And also we have just hit 10,000 followers on Insta, which is again awesome. So I just want to say thank you so much everyone for all the love and support you have given. It means so much to me, so thank you so much. And that's it for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all in my next video. Bye bye.